What's up, football fans? Training camp has kicked off, and it's time for the 2019 preview and predictions here on the Say What You Like Sports podcast. So we're going to kick it off talking about the AFC North first. And I think the first team we want to talk about, Eric, is the Cincinnati Bengals.
That is true. New head coach in Zach Taylor. Marvin Lewis is gone. They also have offensive coordinator Brian Callahan as well as defensive coordinator Lou Amarillo. I think I said that right.
I think so.
So when we break down some of their players on offense first, and what your impressions of them are.
First, let's talk about Marvin Lewis is gone. Doesn't that kind of make this team a bit of a wild card to you now? Because we were so used to the Marvin Lewis way in Cincinnati.
It's 2 decades almost, I think.
Yeah.
And, yeah, they're going to be very different because we don't know what Zach Taylor brings to the game. Rookie head coach, comes under...
He's a disciple of McVay, right?
Yeah, that, West Coast offense. And so it is going to look different. They are a wild card because you don't know, A, what this offense is going to look like, and B, how well these players who have only been in one type of offense, how they take to it, how they adapt to it. You've got guys like Andy Dalton and A.J. Green, Tyler Eifert, that have only known kind of one type of offense, one type of way.
One coach.
Yeah, so to change it up like this, part of it is they're going to be, we don't know what they're going to look like in 2019.
Yeah, I think that if the coaching staff can get this team on a good foot, I think this team could be surprisingly underrated, surprisingly dangerous. In 2018, the team started 4-1 before the injury bug hit. Andy Dalton, I remember that game on Thursday Night Football where he threw 4 TDs in the first half and basically, destroyed the Ravens. 3 of those touchdowns were to A.J. Green. I just think that part of it was the Marvin Lewis effect. Sorry, he just wasn't a winner. And I think the team kind of, how do you say that, sort of just drew that bad energy from him. So now he's gone, and I'm hoping with a little luck with the injuries, this team might be dangerous. Andy Dalton, he's going into the season. I think the pressure's on him. They drafted quarterback Ryan Finley in the 4th round. He was playing well through the first 11 games. Then he hurt his thumb, and it was game over for him. But I think, like I said, with health permitted, I think this offense can be a good one.
Yeah, I think we disagree here because when I look at Andy Dalton, he's the ultimate average quarterback. He truly needs a lot of talent. When A.J. Green was in his prime, when Tyler Eifert was healthy, when they have this offensive line that could hold up, when their defense had playmakers on it, yeah, they were great because he could feed off that. They don't have that. Whenever you put pressure on Andy Dalton, I always think he can't live up to it. And the one player, because I agree with you, when you look at their roster, they're loaded on skill positions, right? They're loaded with, A.J. Green. You have Joe Mixon, Giovanni Bernard. They're set,
That's a good 1-2 punch at running back.
Exactly. They drafted for O-line, but brings me to my problem is, 1, injuries, which hampered them last year.
Right.
And 2, their offensive line. That same person they drafted, Jonah Williams, tackle out of Alabama, is hurt, and I think he's going to miss the year. Their offensive line is not good. And when you don't have a great offensive line with an average quarterback that needs time, and you're in the NFC North and you're defending against Baltimore, who always have a stout defense, you have the Steelers and their defensive line, and that's going to be hard. And, of course, you have the Browns and, Myles Garrett. It's so hard for me to think that they're going to get a step up on offense because they don't have a great offensive line, and their quarterback is someone I think needs a great offensive line to produce.
When I take a look at some of the teams that the Bengals are going to have to compete with in this division, I look at the running game, and I really think this is, with the exception of Baltimore, I think this is probably the second best running game in the division.
Yeah.
Mixon was, just shy of 1,200 yards?
Around there, yeah.
Yeah, and you named Giovanni Bernard. He's good catching balls out of the backfield. I don't know what the offensive line is going to look like with the injuries. I do have to say, I know they have that left tackle, Cordy Glenn. He's solid. He was solid in Buffalo. I think he was a Pro Bowler back in the Buffalo days. So, again, it's just about how this team's going to mesh. But let's talk a little bit about the other side of the ball. Let's switch the focus to the defense. Vontaze Burfict, he's now in Oakland. Do you think that's a good or a bad thing?
That's a good thing. That's addition by subtraction because one thing with Vontaze Burfict is when he was, I think, Arizona State, he was extremely talented. You saw as a linebacker what he could do, but he didn't have it above the shoulders. And he cost them a playoff game against the Steelers.
Yeah, that was bad.
That was bad. And, and at this point, between the suspensions, and his talent was starting to erode. He wasn't as good as he was a few years ago. You still have Geno Atkins, who's probably, a top 5 D tackle, interior lineman.
Oh, for sure.
Carlos Dunlap. They have talent there. And the thing is, I'm not sure the scheme. What scheme that I'm going to call him Lou A, because I'm about to pronounce that name again.
Yeah.
Defense coordinator Lou A is going to bring to them, and what they're going to look like. That I'm not sure. They're facing a team, again, in their own division, they're going to have to deal with, a multitude of different offenses. With Baltimore, it's going to be run heavy. You're going to have to watch out for Lamar.
Right.
With the Steelers, you're dealing with Big Ben and his ability to escape and make plays.
Juju.
Connor Williams. And then you look at, the Browns with, Baker and OBJ and Landry and that. So their defense is kind of that's the bigger question mark, in my opinion, than the offense on this line. I mean, we know that
especially with Marvin Lewis's absence, because he was a defensive-minded coach. So how much is this defense going to change schematically?
Yeah.
They still have the talent. It's just, if there's one good thing you can say about Marvin Lewis, man, the dude knew defense.
Yeah, he made sure that, and this is the thing across the Bengals that I looked at. They were always stable. Marvin Lewis kind of looked even keel. They were always even keel. And if their talent held up, they could be 12-4 as they were in years past. If injuries hit, they'd be 10-6 or 8-8. So it's going to be interesting what these coaches and these new coordinators bring to the team. There's going to be ups and downs. I look at their non-conference schedule. They start going to Seattle, then they're home to the Niners week 2. They also have the Jags in New England, and the Rams as well. So
some tough offenses.
Yeah, they're gonna deal with a lot this year.
I mean, they got the tools though on defense. They still got Dre Kirkpatrick back in the defensive backfield, former Alabama DB. I think the safeties are underrated. I looked up some of these stats, man. Sean Williams, he had 110 tackles, 5 interceptions, and then they had a rookie, Jesse Bates, opposite, and he had 3 picks. I'd love for my team to have my starting safeties have 8 picks. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys, you mentioned the defensive line and the front 7 are pretty good. So I think schematically, if they don't take a step back and possibly a step forward, you know what? I'm just going to say it. My pick is I can see the Cincinnati Bengals finishing 3rd, but I'm going to go ahead and say they can finish as high as 2nd in this division.
Wow. As we do these predictions and previews, I don't think there's going to be a team that we differ so much on, because their highest is 4th and their lowest is 4th. Okay. I'm sorry if this pisses off Bengals fans. I don't,
It's nothing personal.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if Zach Taylor, it turns out to be a really good coach and the next McVay and the guy who can help, I think in time you guys can build to be something. But when I look at their offensive line having to deal with the teams that I said, you're in the NFC North, you're dealing with a lot of great defenses. I don't know what A.J. Green is going to look like. We heard the report out of training camp. He was limping. He was hurt.
Yeah, he got carted off today.
Yeah, and I just don't believe in Andy Dalton. I think the only reason he's even with Lamar Jackson is just because Lamar is still learning how to be a thrower, but is a dynamic runner. I think both those quarterbacks are nowhere near Baker or Ben. And when I look at the schedule, I look at their O-line, I look at the fact that they could start off 0-2 and still have a ton to deal with. I think that they're not only going to finish 4th, but I think they're going to be one of the worst teams. They'll be picking in the top 5 in the 2020 NFL draft.
Apparently, Baker Mayfield woke up feeling dangerous, but the question here in this podcast is going to be, how dangerous are the Cleveland Browns to the rest of the AFC North in 2019?
Yeah, I mean, much like the Cincinnati Bengals, they'll be starting a rookie head coach in Freddie Kitchens, who brought on Todd Monken and his offense that was really good in Tampa to be his OC, and recently fired Steve Wilkes to coach the defense. They also drafted Greedy Williams in the 2nd. They had no first due to the Odell Beckham trade.
Right.
Shoni Taki, linebacker, I think out of Washington, Stanford, and Mac Wilson, linebacker out of Alabama in the 5th round. On offense, they boast one of the most talented offenses in the league, with Baker Mayfield coming for a 2nd year. You also have Nick Chubb, Duke Johnson, Kareem Hunt, who they picked up after his incident in Kansas City, and he'll be suspended 8 games. Those are dynamic running backs. Of course, we talked about OBJ and the big blockbuster trade of the offseason to go with Jarvis Landry. Antonio Callahan, Rashard Higgins, and David Njoku at tight end. I mean, when you look at this offense, I mean, it's got to be one of the most talented offenses just on paper in the league.
Yeah, on paper, it's definitely one of the most talented teams in the league. I think even on both sides of the ball. Baker Mayfield has really, though, given this team some spirit. You know, forget the statistics for a second, but I think he's given them that moxie. Baker had 27 touchdowns as a rookie, which is now a rookie record. He beat Peyton Manning's record of 26. I believe that was shared with Russell Wilson. And he went 6-7 as a starter. So, again, there's a lot of upside in Baker Mayfield. There's a lot of upside. This team's young. Nick Chubb, rookie last season, 1,000-yard back. You talked about Kareem Hunt. He's not too old. OBJ, he's not even – how old's OBJ?
I think 27. He's entering his prime.
Yeah, he's entering his prime. Jarvis Landry is probably a top 5 slot receiver in the league. David Njoku, he's
athletic tight end.
Athletic tight end. He's still growing into the role, I think. He hasn't really, like, busted out yet and had, like, a spectacular year. But you know what? With this kind of talent around him, maybe this is the year. I know you're really high on Cleveland, but I got to question one thing, and that's the coaching. Because like you said, on paper, this team is stacked. But at this point, Freddie Kitchens is pretty unproven to me. He has no head coaching experience previously. So with all these egos, with all these young players, I think there's potential for disaster and underachievement here.
I think that comes to how they come out the blocks, how they start their season. I mean, they open with Tennessee before their Monday night game against the Jets. Those two teams aren't world beaters. So I think if he can start off and, you know, get the ball rolling with wins, I think they'll be fine to start the season. The question will be when they hit a rough patch. Or, you know, I liken him to, and that team to the Chargers, the LA Chargers, where, you know, I don't know about Anthony Lynn as a head coach. We'll touch on them later, you know, another episode. But the talent of the Chargers on offense is so great that they're able to overcome their coaching to a degree, can get them to make the playoffs. And I think that's what I look at with Cleveland is, you know, there's just so much. I mean, you look at Baker Mayfield's accuracy, ability to sense pressure. I mean, he's got that sixth sense. I mean, there's a little bit of Favre to him, you know, as far as his dynamic playmaking, his accuracy to run on the, you know, throw on the move and throw accurate on the move. Now you have Odell Beckham Jr., who, you know, I think he kind of, this has to wake him up in a sense that, you know, you were traded from New York to Cleveland, you know, they paid you and then they got rid of you. Yeah. So you would hope that he now has a quarterback who I think at this point in their careers, Baker Mayfield is better than Eli Manning, you know, today. As far as what, you know, he's a better quarterback.
Right, yeah.
Would you rather start Eli Manning or would you rather...
I can't disagree with that at this point anymore.
Career, yeah. You know, and also the weapons now. You have underneath routes and, you know, the ability to throw the ball underneath with Jarvis Landry working on a slot. Duke Johnson, who, you know, I know he's requesting a trade, wants out, but, you know, I think he's not going to get traded, I think, until midseason when Hunt comes back. Right. He's a midseason trade candidate. Can catch the ball out of the backfield. You look at the offense, what it took, what it did, you know, once Freddie Kitchens kind of took over and kind of ran it. Yes, you're right. As a head coach, we don't know. Todd Monken comes in, you know, and he had a 5,000-yard offense in Tampa, you know, and the ability to stretch the ball deep. You look at that, I think there's enough on offense. Now, they have similar issues that the Cincinnati Bengals have on offensive line. It's funny how for a decade feels like their best player was their left tackle in Joe Staley. He's now gone, and you wonder, you know, what that offensive line is going to look like. You know,
they meant Joe Thomas, Niner fan.
Huh?
I think you meant Joe Thomas.
Oh, did I say?
You said Joe Staley.
Oh, dang. Yeah. See where my mind is. Yeah, I meant Joe Thomas. My bad. You look at, he's gone, and now that offensive line is a big question mark. And again, the same thing. You're facing the NFC North. Just like they're going to go up against Geno Atkins and the defensive line that Pittsburgh fronts and the Baltimore, who's always going to have a solid defense. The difference is that I think Baker Mayfield's ability to sense pressure, to make plays, is going to be what makes this offense really great.
Yeah, and on the defensive side of the ball, they're not too shabby either, man. I mean, Myles Garrett, 13.5 sacks, former number 1 overall pick. And the record for the Browns for sacks in the season is 14, so he was just half a sack shy. I think he's probably aiming to grab that record.
Break that.
Yeah, Olivier Vernon comes over from the New York Giants. He only had 7 sacks last season, but as a Cowboys fan, I can tell you he's given Tyron Smith fits, and he's always around the passer. So there's a lot of talent on this team on defense, but I got to admit, I think the defensive backfield is kind of sketchy on this team. Terrence Mitchell is a starting cornerback for this team, and he was like the 5th or 6th DB on the Cowboys maybe like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wow, and you're putting him out there as a starter. So that front seven better perform. You know, they brought over Sheldon Richardson. So I think he was playing with the Vikings last season,
yes.
But, you know, we know him from the Jets.
Yeah. You look at, I remember the year that they drafted Baker, they also had the 4th round pick, and everybody thought they were going to pick Chubb. I forget, the defensive end that ended up going to Denver.
Yeah.
Bradley Chubb.
Bradley, I was going to say Nick, but I go, no, that's the running back.
Yeah, it's Bradley Chubb. They passed on him. They got a little bit of criticism taking Denzel Ward, you know, an undersized corner. And I think they were proven to be right. I love Bradley Chubb, but I think they made the better choice getting a defensive back to pair alongside Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
You know, and I think he performed well. I think he was one of the top rookies on defense. And I wouldn't be surprised if their first pick in this year's draft, Greedy Williams, the defensive back at LSU, ends up taking that starting spot opposite of Ward. We went into 2018 in college thinking he was going to be a top defensive player and a top pick. And the knock on him is you know, he's not a great tackler, or he avoided tackling, and the rumor is whether he can't tackle, whether he avoided it because he knew he was going to be a great draft pick. But when it comes to covering wide receivers, he was top notch. His ability, his fluid hips, his ability to play man and zone. Greedy Williams was a really good player. I think people just knocked him for his tackling. And when, you know, scouts and coaches don't like to hear that he didn't want to tackle.
Right.
If that was the issue, you'd think it would be gone now that he's in the pros. He's making money. He wants to play. So, you know, you add him across from Denzel Ward, and I think you really have a great defense. I wouldn't be surprised if their defense outshined their offense, especially kind of early on, because I think Myles Garrett's just a beast. Myles Garrett is
without a doubt.
You know, he's going to emerge as probably, this is his breakout season. Now he has Olivier Vernon to play opposite of him, to kind of flush teams to him, you know.
Right.
So I think on defense, just like on offense, they're stacked at skill positions.
They're stacked, without a doubt. You look at this team on paper, and, I mean, it's intimidating. But when I also look at this thing on paper, egos all over the field, egos on both sides of the ball. That means lots of egos in the locker room. And in order to get a huge collection of egos and have them all buy into one system, one team, that is a lot to ask of a rookie head coach in Freddie Kitchens. I got to say, you know what, for me, I think there's a lot of explosiveness in this offense and defense, but that word explosive can go both ways, man.
Yeah.
I see this team honestly probably finishing 3rd. If Cincinnati gets bit by the injury bug, I can see this team finishing 2nd.
I look at the NFC North, and right now there's a window, right? The Bengals are bringing in, just like them, they're bringing in a new rookie head coach, and they're installing a new scheme. This is new. This isn't like, the difference is that at least Freddie Kitchens and the Browns, they're used to Freddie Kitchens' scheme. They had it last year. So
on offense.
Yes, that's not new as far as in putting that scheme together.
Right.
They're used to it from last year. With the Bengals, this is a whole new scheme. So they're I think, going to take some time. They don't have as many playmakers on both sides of the ball like Cleveland does. When I look at the Ravens, you know, they're going to be transitioning their offense. When I look at the Steelers, they're also in a period of transition. They're trying to build up their defense while deal with the losses of Lev Bell and Antonio Brown. So I think in this window, in this moment, if they can win those first 2 games and they can get rolling, I expect this team to win that division and be a top 3 seed. I'm looking at 10, 11 wins for this team.
High expectations, man. High expectations. I won't go that high, but like I said, this team's good on paper. I'm just afraid of some of the cracks on the team. I think there's a few weak links in the chain. I haven't talked about the left tackle. Greg Robinson is this team's left tackle, the former number 2 overall pick. He was released by both the Rams and the Lions, man. The Lions, if the Lions are releasing you and you're supposed to be protecting Baker Mayfield, I don't know.
He's going to have to overcome that.
I'm just saying, these are potential. They might just look like small lighter flames, but with all that gasoline in the locker room,
Boom
all
or
it
bust.
takes, boom or bust. That, to me, will sum up the Cleveland Browns in 2019. The next team in the AFC North we need to talk about, we are going to talk about the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens had a up and down season after a 4-5 start. Flacco injures his hip, and then, of all things, the Ravens go 6-1 down the stretch and make the playoffs. Lamar Jackson, I feel, gets a lot of credit for that turnaround since he took over at the quarterback spot. But I think the unsung hero there was the defense, because that defense really nailed down and really took over games late in the season. And I think that's why that team was a playoff team. But what are some of your expectations in 2019 for these Ravens?
Well, with the two previous teams we talked about breaking in new coaches, the Ravens still have John Harbaugh, which was interesting because I think midway through the season when they were floundering and struggling, there was a lot of question whether he would return.
He was on the hot seat.
Yeah, he rallied the troops and they made the playoffs. They won the division. He now has Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator and Don Martindale as his defensive coordinator. And with Greg Roman, who 49ers fans know and remember not so fondly, was the offensive coordinator under John's brother, Jim Harbaugh. And in that time, he also managed a quarterback who was dual threat in Colin Kaepernick and designed an offense that, for a while, it was hard for defenses to handle with that running game. And I think that's what you look at now with Gus Edwards and Mark Ingram in the backfield, kind of power running. Lamar Jackson, who's more of a runner than a thrower at this point. The difference is, they don't have the dynamic tight end that the Niners had in Vernon Davis. And their wide receiving core is not really much to speak about. They drafted Hollywood Brown first overall at Oklahoma, but he's yet to practice. So this offense,
it's kind of sad when you're looking at Willie Snead as your best wide receiver.
That's some problems. I mean, they drafted the year ago. They drafted Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews as their tight ends, but this is a team that probably has maybe the second best offensive line in that division with Yonda and Ronnie Stanley kind of anchoring the left side, I believe. But this is also a team that they're not built to kind of play from behind. If a team's able to get up on them, I don't think they have the weapons, and I don't think Lamar Jackson's the type of quarterback that can kind of rally the troops to win. I know they had some success in that playoff game at the end, but teams are ready for them on offense. I don't see much there.
No, and you know what? Like I said, I give a lot of those wins. I pinned that on the defense taking them there. And that defense, man, they had some losses in the offseason. They lose Eric Weddle. They lose Suggs. They lose C.J. Mosley. I mean, those are all big-time playmakers on defense. And I really feel like, look, I know Lamar Jackson's a young quarterback. I know he's got a lot of potential, but he looked bad in that playoff game. There was a lot of balls being thrown at receivers' feet. There was a lot of fumbles. The ball was loose, taking sacks that he didn't need to take. I mean, it looked terrible. So I think that when these defensive coordinators, now that they have some tape, they're going to shut down what, I'm sorry to say, in my opinion, was a gimmick offense last season.
Yeah, I think so too. And then you look at the defense too. You did add Shane Ray coming over from Denver in free agency, and then their big get is Earl Thomas. Earl Thomas coming off a broken leg.
Right.
Can he be the same? And it's just like,
and that's the second time he's broke that leg, right?
Yeah. So they signed him like a 4-year big money deal.
Big money. Way out of the Cowboys and Niners.
There was a lot of
pay
in the
scale.
offseason. He was supposed to go to either one of those teams, but he went with the Ravens and the money. And I just look at this team as Harbaugh will rally them to a point, but I just can't see this team who has, they have to go to Kansas City. They have to go to Seattle in the season.
It's going to be a beast.
They host New England, and they go out to LA to host the Rams, or to play the Rams, excuse me. So I just can't see, like, if they're playing a team like the Rams, and the Rams go up 17-0 or 24-7, and you're asking Lamar Jackson to throw, and now they're ready for him. They've had a season to break him down. I really don't see this team at its best. If everything breaks right for this team, they may finish second in the division, but even then, I'm not too confident in saying that. I think they finished a solid third.
Yeah, I can honestly see this team finishing last in the division just because, look, I think they rely heavily on the run game and the defense, which is solid. That got them to the playoffs last year. But, I think that this team's really going to feel the loss of Ozzie Newsome because I think he's one of the greatest GMs of all time. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the players that he's drafted and the teams he's developed under his watch.
Ray Lewis.
They had
Ed Reed. Jonathan Ogden out of UCLA.
Was the one I was thinking of. He was one of the first picks, I think, in Baltimore.
He was the first pick
for Baltimore. You know, they've had so much. You know, he's been able to build a team with all across the board. So, you know, now I think it's Eric DeCosta who runs is the GM now, and you know, I'm anxious to see what they do as far as building because
I don't think he's going to be Ozzie though.
No,
you know, he's not going to be Ozzie, and honestly, I got to be skeptical that John Harbaugh can keep the wheels from falling off in 2019.
We'll see.
Finishing up the AFC North, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're doing their team last, but they're certainly not least. I think this team is really going to test the theory of addition by subtraction. They're losing AB, and they're losing Le'Veon Bell. Last of the three Bs is Ben Roethlisberger. Is he enough to win this division?
Man, I don't know. This one's going to be interesting. I mean, when you look at the Steelers, they are the model of consistency. I mean, it feels like they've had, 3 head coaches in 50, 60 years?
They have had 3 head coaches.
And, I mean, Mike Tomlin's been there. He just signed his extension for another year. Offensive coordinator Randy Fletcher, along with defensive coordinator Keith Butler, kind of rounded up the coaching staff. Since, you know, the tragic accident that took Shazier away, you know, they've been trying to find a linebacker to kind of centerpiece that defense. So much that they traded up with Denver to draft Devin Bush, linebacker out of Michigan, 10th overall, I believe.
Yeah, you think he's going to live up to Shazier's footsteps?
That's hard because I feel like he's iconic in that area now, and that's saying something for Steelers.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but I think for the first time since his departure, they have speed, instinctiveness. You know, they have a real linebacker to captain that defense. And that defensive front seven is one of the best in the league. I mean, you look at the guys that they have.
Hayward, Tuitt, Hargrave.
I mean, you have Watt, Dupree, and now him. You know, the defense, for as much as we talk about the offense, and it feels like the Steelers kind of went through a transition where, you know, the last 4 or 5 years they were heavy offense, where we have always known the Steelers in our childhood to be a defensive-minded team.
Right.
You know, and so they look pretty good on offense. It's Big Ben and bust. I mean, you know the players on offense.
Yeah, on offense, man, I think this team is going to go as far as Big Ben can take them. I mean, statistically, only Patrick Mahomes was better in 2018. So, I mean, for me, Ben Roethlisberger is by far the best quarterback in this division.
Yes.
I mean, that goes without saying. Threw for 5,129 yards to go along with 34 touchdowns. And he's got the OC that he's always wanted, which was anybody but Todd Haley. So he should be a happy man, you know. They're just going to have to find a way to replace the production from AB because AB, man, he still had some big numbers. 104 receptions, 1,297 yards, and 15 touchdowns. But we were talking earlier, and it seems like the Steelers always are constantly replacing great receivers with another great receiver.
And not only that, but they seem to find these guys. They're not first-round receivers or second. They find these guys in the 5th, 6th round. AB was a 6th-round pick.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about he replaced guys like Emmanuel Sanders and Santonio Holmes, who replaced, Plexico Burress.
Don't forget Wallace.
And Hines, and Mike Wallace. And so, they've always been able to produce, to identify low drafted receivers, get them to produce, get them to contribute, but it takes time. AB didn't come on the scene when he was drafted. It took time, and I think that's what's going to happen for the crop of receivers they have. And for Juju, that's going to be big because he no longer gets to enjoy the coverage that he had while defense is worried about Antonio Brown. Now they're going to, roll their coverage to him.
Right, defensive coordinators are going to game plan to stop him now.
Yeah. And then you look at the loss of Le'Veon Bell, and I mean, he was out this year anyway, and the emergence of James Conner. But James Conner, he took a beating. He wasn't the same guy at the end of the season as he was at the beginning.
No.
They did draft Benny Snell to kind of maybe spell him, and they look to plan to do that.
Hopefully they can get James Conner through the whole season this year.
Yeah, doing that. They have their second-round pick they drafted last year at wide receiver, and James Washington.
Yes.
So you look at the team, and the one thing I think they are going to start to kind of go back to the Steelers of old. The talent is on the defensive side, I think, a little bit more right now. I think it'll take a while for the offense to get going. I think Ben's going to have to get used to not just throwing it to AB. I mean, in the last playoff game they were in against Jacksonville, when they were trying to claw back in that game, it was like, AB go deep, and he would, and Ben would find him deep. You look at the team as a whole, they have talent, they have coaching, but man, there's a lot of question marks, as far as being able to sustain that. Ben's another year older. I mean, where do you see this team?
Look, when I look at this team and I look at this division specifically, no team to me is overly impressive here. I think I really couldn't see any of these 4 teams winning it all this year. But I do see the Pittsburgh Steelers as a solid playoff team. I think they're the favorite to win this division. I think they have the best, if not one of the best offensive lines in the AFC. You got Villanueva. We were naming them, right? Foster, Pouncey, DeCastro. Who's their right tackle? I think they switched him up. They switched him up at the end. But you got 4 solid starters on an offensive line. And they did lose the offensive line coach, though, Mike Munchak.
Yes.
He's in Denver, I think.
Yeah, he went to Denver.
So, we'll see how they hold up. But that offense should be good enough. Yeah, there was some heavy subtractions. There's some numbers that they have to replace, some production they have to replace. But let me just throw out a stat I looked up. The Steelers, they ran a 3-4 defense. So defensive linemen aren't known for producing heavy major stats. And this team, that D-line combined for 20 sacks, which is just impressive in a 3-4 scheme.
Yeah,
so
they're not built to do that.
No, they're not. That front 7 is tough. My concern would be the defensive backfield. So the name of Joe Hayden is still there, but is he still the Joe Hayden we knew in Cleveland?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't really see that too much, but I think if they can shore up some of the issues on defense, I think the offense will get going sometime within the middle of the season, and I think they're the favorite to win this division.
I don't know. When I look at this team, I kind of see a team that, like I said before, is going to rotate back into the Steelers of old. I think I do plan on seeing them run the ball with multiple sets, running out of shotgun, inside zone, inside power moves. I think they're going to let the defense come. The schedule makers did not do them any favors. They opened the season at New England, which is a house of horrors for them.
But like I was telling you, they beat New England last season.
Yes.
At the end of the year, and always New England starts slow. They always drop one in the first couple of games.
Yes, but you're giving Belichick. I feel like you're giving Belichick a chance to, and the reason why New England seems to struggle is it feels like, I don't know why, they always seem to start the season at Kansas City.
True.
They always seem to play
enough.
Kansas City, and Kansas City seems to give them fits at the beginning. So when I look at this team, I just think that they're starting up there. They still have to play Seattle. They have the Colts. They have the Rams. They have their interdivisional ones. And when I look at this team, I think it's going to be a tale of two teams. I think it's a team that's going to start off slow on the offense, as the receivers try to kind of find their footing in this offense, and they learn how they're going to be able to play. Ben's going to have to learn to trust people besides Juju to get the job done.
Right.
But I think as the season rolls on, if they could stay healthy, if the defense holds true, I think the defense will carry them at the beginning of the season. I think they'll round into form. I could see at the end of back half of their schedule beating a team like the Cardinals and the Jets and Buffalo. But I just think they're going to finish a game behind the Browns. I think the Browns are going to build up a lead in that division. And I could see the Steelers, finishing 10-6 and just being a game behind the Browns. But I think that if they finish that way, there's a lot going forward for them to build on so long as Ben comes back.
So rounding out the AFC North here, let's put our final predictions in for the way these teams are going to finish. I got the Baltimore Ravens at 4th. I have the Cleveland Browns at 3rd. Cincinnati Bengals, I think they're going to finish 2nd. I think they're more dangerous than most people would think so early on in this preseason. And then I'm going to go with the Steelers at 1.
It's funny with the Bengals. The only thing I think of second in the Bengals is with the second pick in the NFL draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select.
All right. Okay.
But I think they're going to finish 4th. And I think they're going to finish 4th by a mile. We're talking about 3 to 4 wins versus I think the team that finishes 3rd, which is Baltimore, with 8-9 wins. I think like those top 3 are going to be clumped together. I think Pittsburgh starts, 4-4, 3-4, and they find their groove and they hit it at 10-6. And I think the Browns have enough talent, and this division is in flux to the point where they can take advantage of this division and win the division at 11-5.